Hello, welcome to my channel. In this session, we are going to talk about retaining or deleting Microsoft Teams chats automatically. So for that, we need to talk about Microsoft 365 retention policy for Teams only. So the agendas that we are going to talk today about is going to be what is Microsoft 365 retention policy, Microsoft 365 retention policy principles, and then key points for Microsoft Teams retention policy. And then we will demo how to create a Microsoft Teams retention policy retaining chat messages and channel messages. Right, let's first talk about what is Microsoft retention policy. So what is possible to be set and configured for retention with retention policy? With retention policy in Microsoft 365, you can retain content. So now you can retain policy on retain content on Teams, SharePoint, or OneDrive, and Exchange. Remember, this is Microsoft 365 retention policy. It does apply to retaining or deleting Microsoft 365 content, not just Teams. And then also you can configure a policy to delete only or delete the content. For example, you can say delete this department's chat messages after 2 years, that department chat message after 5 years. The same applies to your SharePoint data in OneDrive. Now, once you have the capability with the retention policy to retain and delete content, basically you can mix also. So a policy you can create is just retain only, meaning retain my Teams messages for 2 years, and after 2 years do nothing. So it says retain only. Or you can say after 2 years delete my Teams chat. So up to 2 years it doesn't do anything. Once it hits 2 years mark, it will delete the message. So this is delete only policy. And then you can also mix retain and delete. Basically say retain my Teams for 5 years, and then after that delete it. So retaining for 5 years for sure, and after 5 years the deleting is also certain there. So this is a basic functionality of Microsoft 365 retention policy. Now there are Microsoft retention policy principles and key points to remember for it. Number one, if you have got conflicting policy for, let's say, two policies conflicting applied to the same group of users. In this case, if you have got a delete policy that says delete this message in 2 years, other one says retain it for 5 years, retention wins, delete will be ignored. If you have got two conflicted policies on same group of users, one says retain it for 5 years, other says retain it for 10 years, in this case retention will win. The longest retention will win, sorry. Explicit wins over implicit. If you have a policy that applies to all the department, and then you have got a delete policy that only applies to a specific group of users. In this case, both policies are for deleting the data. So whatever your explicit policy says, that is going to be winning the rule here, and that only applies to delete though. And then if you have got two implicit or two explicit delete policy, in this case, whichever is the shortest one, that one will win. In case of retention, the longest retention will win. In case of deletion, the shortest deletion will win. In case of retention and deletion being together, at that point, retention will win always. I hope that's clear, but there is a good documentation out from Microsoft that explains everything pretty clearly. This is another view to it. We talked about level 1, level 2. This is only for retention, and then going to level 3, that only applies to delete policies. So this is another chart there, just for your information. Now, jumping to retention policy for Microsoft Teams chat. Key things to remember: Teams chats or chat are stored in hidden folder in the mailbox of each user in the chat. So if a user is chatting, those chat messages are stored in the mailbox of that user in Exchange, but there is a hidden section that Exchange admins, they can't see it. Teams channel messages are stored in a similar hidden folder in the group mailbox for the team. So there is a group mailbox for every single team that you have. All channel messages are stored there. Now for Teams private channel messages, they are stored in hidden folder of the user's mailbox. So if a user is member of a private channel, all those private channel messages that they are talking in a private channel, they are stored in user's mailbox, similar to regular chats that the users will have. Microsoft Teams chats retention policy. And now key points to remember for this: when you're creating Microsoft 365 Teams chat policy or Microsoft 365 retention policy for chats, Microsoft Teams require a separate retention policy. So you cannot mix Microsoft Teams retention policy with Exchange, for example, or SharePoint. Both of them cannot be in one policy. Microsoft Teams are not included in an org-wide policy. You may create a policy following your compliance guidelines saying that everything should be retained for 10 years or 5 years or whatever time. You can say that, configure that policy for Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, 365 groups, and other products in one policy, but that policy cannot include Teams. Teams does not support advanced retention policy. Advanced retention policy is based on retention labels. So for Microsoft Teams chat, you cannot retain chat messages through retention labels. So that's not supported. And then if you have a retention policy for deleting chat messages, it may take up to 7 days to clean up those expired chats. Let's say if you have got a retention policy that deletes Teams chat every 24 hours, you may see that deleted messages in your eDiscovery cases or content search cases up to 7 days. That's because it is coming from the cache engine from Substrate. There is also a documentation from Microsoft that explains this, why this is the case. But it is the cleanup process is taking place between 3 to 7 days. So maximum time is 7 days. All right, so let's do a demo. I'm going to create 2 policies, one for Microsoft Teams chat and channel messages, and one for private chat messages. So I will fire up my test tenant. So in test tenant, either you can come to compliance.microsoft.com and hit enter. If you're compliance administrator, then you will see this page in Microsoft Purview. Under solutions, you will see data lifecycle management. Click on that in Microsoft 365. So this page will show you the overview, but you need to click on retention policies. If you have a policy for any product in 365, you will see all the policies over here. For me, I have none. So I'm going to create one for Teams, chat, and channel messages. So I'm going to say retain Teams, chat, and channel messages appears with delete. So I'm going to say retain it for 5 years, and then after that, delete it. You can put some descriptions here and do next, next. I'm not including any admin here. So you will have two options here. One is adaptive. Adaptive does require an E5 for users to have, and I can demo if you would like in a separate video about how you can do an adaptive policy and how it is used for your teams. But in this case, we will pick up the static. This is the traditional way of creating a retention policy. It has been like this for many years. And do next. So the point to prove, if I create a policy for all my products, I can do that. Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, 365 groups, Skype, public folders, all of them can be in one policy. As soon as I turn on Teams, everything will go off. That means Teams require a separate policy. And I can say Teams channel messages, Teams chats, and Copilot interactions. So for this too, I can include them in one policy. As soon as I toggle on the Teams private channel messages, it will go off, which means that on a minimum, I need two policies. One for this and one for this too. I can create 3 policies to target each one, but that's up to you how you decide in your organization. You can include teams from here, exclude teams from here. You can include users, exclude users. So in this case, I will target everybody in all teams. Next. So I said 5 years. I have 5 years option here. If I didn't have it, then I can customize it and put 5 years in specific months and days if I want to. Start retention policy based on when items were created. For Teams chat, the creation is based on send date and receive date. So that's that one. And then the second option is when items were last modified. We don't want to do that because generally in Teams, if a user is modifying something, that means they are correcting their typo. Doesn't really make sense, but for documents it does make sense. So we will pick up this option, and after 5 years, delete items, or you have got the options to do nothing. In this case, it will be retain only. Now retain and delete. And I have got retain items forever, only delete items when they reach a certain age. I will create another policy for this one only. This one is retain forever. And then next. So every time that your policy has a delete option, you will get this disclaimer saying that after you turn on this policy, if you happen to have a chat that's older than 5 years, we will delete them, and there is no point. You cannot recover it. Microsoft cannot recover it for you either. So you submit it. So this policy is only retaining my channel messages and chat messages. I need one more. So in this case, delete Teams with chat or after 4 or 3 years maybe. So delete private Teams private chats, private channel chats, I should say, so that I'm clear. After 3 years, Next, and static. I'm going to select Teams private channel. I can exclude users, but I'm not. Next. In this case, my focus is going to be just delete, meaning I don't touch messages for 3 years, and after 3 years, my policy should delete them all. Maybe that's the requirement. Maybe that's the compliance guidelines that I should adhere in my organization. So that's the reason that I'm doing it. And from the time that they were created, 3 years, then delete. Next. And again, delete is there, and you will see this. Then submit. Okay, so minimum 2 policies are required to retain or delete Teams, or provide some sort of protections from retention policy to Teams chat messages. You do realize that I have not selected files. However, users, they upload files in their chats, they upload files in their channel messages. Files in files in chats and channel messages, they are stored in SharePoint and OneDrive. If you want to retain them or put a delete policy for them, you need to target SharePoint and OneDrive locations for this. So that is going to be a separate topic, because that is not a part of Teams retention. All right, so that was the demo here. If you have any questions, any comments, feel free to let me know. I would love to see your comments, and then create more video based on your comments. But thank you so much